What's good, y'all? Welcome to Playmakers Corner. This is the very first episode of our reformatted podcast, formerly the Cycle 365. I am one of your co-hosts, Simon Voyanos.
And I'm one of your other co-hosts, Kodey Stoffer.
And here we are. We're going to kick off the restart of the podcast, or the beginning of Playmakers Corner, by talking about JUCOs, and more specifically JUCO players. So in this episode, we're gonna break down the career of Chad Kelly. So there's a lot that went down with Chad Kelly. How did we want to go about this? We're gonna talk about his JUCO / freshman days first, give some backstory there, and then move on. Is that what you're thinking, Kodey?
Yep.
All right, sweet. So let me give some backstory on Chad Kelly. Chad Kelly, right now, I think he's currently in the NFL. He's listed on the roster for the Indianapolis Colts, but I'm pretty sure he was on the practice squad for a lot of last season. For those of you who don't know a ton about Chad Kelly, he is the nephew of the Hall of Fame quarterback Jim Kelly. There you go. So he has really good genes and whatnot. He was a talented quarterback coming out of high school. He was a 4-star guy. He had really good offers, actually. I'm reading it right here. He had offers to a ton of Power 5 schools, which includes but is not limited to Florida, Alabama, Florida State, and Michigan State. He eventually chose to sign with Clemson in 2012, but it was pretty short. During the Tigers' 2014 spring game, Chad Kelly he most definitely got in a very heated argument with one of the coaches on the sideline about a 4th down call during a spring game. And basically he said, if you don't start me this season, because the previous season, I think his freshman year, I think he played a handful of games, or he was in a handful of games. I don't know if he started them or not. But he said basically that if he did not start this season, then he was going to quit football entirely, and that's it. And well, spoiler alert, but they said okay, and then they cut him because they had a young freshman quarterback in Deshaun Watson who was sitting behind him, and you know what happened, the rest there. Deshaun ended up, taking the job. He played really well, went to 2 national championships, won one. Chad Kelly, on the other hand, went to the famed, one of the best JUCOs in the country, considered the Alabama of JUCOs, actually, Eastern Mississippi Community College, EMCC. It was featured on Last Chance U, and Chad Kelly was on Last Chance U for a little bit in that first season. I believe he made a little cameo there. But while he was at EMCC, he honestly played really good. He only was there for 1 season, but he killed it. He went undefeated. He put up really good numbers. Do you have those numbers pulled up, Kodey?
I got you. Yeah, I do.
Okay, go for it.
So Chad Kelly, he threw 47 touchdowns to just 8 interceptions during his time at East Mississippi.
Also won a national championship, for JUCO while he was there as well.
Yeah, once again, Simon brought it up. He went undefeated, and he completed 66% of his passes. Almost threw for 4,000 yards, 3,906, averaged 325.5 per game, 8.6 yards per attempt. It's also a good yards per attempt, and only took 4 sacks during the entire season. So,
yeah. So altogether, he played really well. Chad Kelly's season at East Mississippi is what every JUCO player dreams of. Going to a JUCO for 1 season, balling out, and playing against, honestly, probably. We already knew this, significantly lower talent because it is a JUCO. You have a ton of guys who are, cast-offs from D1s, D2s, D3s, or guys that are just walking on from local high schools and whatnot as well. And so Chad Kelly should have dominated at East Mississippi. He was, like I said, he was a 4-star guy, and he was considered a very talented prospect coming out of high school, So, but that's not to say it was still impressive because he played well. And so now we're gonna break down some of Chad Kelly's JUCO film because we watched a pretty long highlight reel because he was just killing it while he was at East Mississippi. So Kodey, why don't you go ahead and tell us some of the strengths that you saw out of the 6'2", 215-pound quarterback in Chad Kelly?
Well, it was pretty easy to notice right off the bat that Kelly outclassed all of his peers on the JUCO level and why he was a 4-star guy in the first place. His arm, I put first off, his arm is one of the strongest that I'd seen, and you could tell that it definitely didn't belong on like a JUCO setting. There is one play where he just flicked like a 40-yard pass. He didn't even step into it. He just used his arm. Like, he was planted, but he didn't step into the throw. And it was a 40-yard pass down the right sideline that ended up being a score. And that blew me away just to see how such a effortlessly strong arm was on the JUCO level. I also want to say things that caught me by surprise that were also something that I'd look for in like an NFL quarterback was his snap count IQ, where, you know, he knew that how to get the other team to jump off sides and to throw it deep to whatever receiver was, you know, running the deepest route. He immediately knew how to do that, and he would put the ball in a place for them to make a play. And he threw a couple of touchdowns on plays that, you know, they were guaranteed 5 yards, but he went for the 50. He went for the 40. He went for the 60. You know what I'm saying? So he had a really good IQ, I'd say, at least on that level. And I'd also say that he was good at following what the play called for, if that makes sense. So, you know, at East Mississippi, they had quite a few fake screens to wheel routes, and he did a good job of selling it with his eyes, looking at the screen before hitting that deep pass down the sideline. And they also had some plays where they would fake the wheel route down the sideline, right? So he would look there and they'd buy that because they just got burnt by it, and then throw the screen pass. So whenever the play design called for him to do something, another one was like flood concepts. He did a good job of like moving east to west. You know, despite his ACL tear in 2013, he still showed some pretty good mobility. And, you know, I'd argue that he looked most coachable at the JUCO level, if that makes sense.
I would actually have to agree with you there. And we'll get to his incidents probably in the last segment when we're reviewing his career. But I would have to agree because he looked like there were significant improvements. Obviously, it's JUCO, right? But if you do look at his freshman film or whatever you could find of it, there's not a lot. But there were most definitely significant improvements, and he played well. He did the right thing on a lot of plays, you know? And there are obviously, like you were saying, some things that he just naturally did well, you know? Was there anything else that you had for him strength-wise, or did you want me to go?
You can go ahead. I tried to keep my strengths and weaknesses to like the 3 biggest ones that I saw. I think the only thing that I wanted to mention was at Clemson, that ACL tear and his red shirting as a freshman over at Clemson. So that, and then, you know, his antics during a spring training game. And also he was smack talking the other quarterback for Clemson that he was competing with on Twitter and stuff. And no, not Deshaun Watson at that time.
Oh, the other one. Never mind.
Yeah, and that was also part of, you know, a pattern that we'll continue to see is, you know, him causing a distraction. Very distracting guy off the field. But we'll talk about his weaknesses on JUCO here in a second. Simon, if you want to talk about his strengths at the JUCO level.
Yeah, for sure. So on the JUCO, I'm going to put this in, you know, in context as we have been, but on the JUCO level, I would definitely agree that he was very focused and he looked like he was super hardworking. This is kind of bad to say, but in his recent football career, I want to say that his 1 year at East Mississippi at EMCC was 1 out of, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 between college and NFL where he did not get in trouble at all. So to me, that showed that he was focused. So if I was a D1 guy looking at Chad Kelly, that's a really good sign for me. And at that time, it was a good sign that maybe this dude matured a little bit because that's what JUCOs do to you. You know, it is a step down. when you go to a JUCO, but it humbles you in a good way. And that's why, JUCOs are honestly really good for a lot of people. Don't get it twisted though. JUCOs won't work out for everyone, but it does teach you some, tough life lessons for sure. And for Chad Kelly, it seemed like he needed that. So for me, the maturity at EMCC was very evident, not only with his gameplay, but, with some of the accomplishments, staying out of trouble first off, and then eventually winning a national championship, not losing a game, all of that great stuff, And so that's something that stood out to me. Next couple things have to do with his running ability. I would say his mobility it's always been really good. And he'll show it more in college and in the NFL, but he's sneaky athletic. Low-key, he's real above average. He's most definitely above average athleticism-wise. Wouldn't you say, Kodey, when it comes to a running standpoint?
Yeah, in the immortal words of his rap song, he said, like Mike Vick, but white. And while I wouldn't go as far as Mike Vick, his athleticism is very sneaky and, definitely caught me by surprise while watching film.
Oh, yeah, for sure. His agility and speed were both impressive to me. On the college level, I felt like it was pretty good. When it went to the pros, I would say it became more above average because of the level of talent and athleticism that he would face, but it's pretty good. He can most definitely hurt people on the ground, but he is disciplined enough to stay in the pocket. And this is another great thing about him. He was really tough, just in general when he's running the ball or when he's throwing it. But anyways, he was very disciplined, staying in the pocket, taking hits, making the throws when possible. But he is not afraid to run, and he's not afraid to throw down his shoulder if it means scoring or getting an extra yard. And those are both really good things to me, because honestly, outside of the ACL injuries, because I'm pretty sure it's only really been ACL problems that Chad Kelly has had throughout his career, he really hasn't had any other injury. So that's pretty good to me, because when it comes to ACLs, obviously your possibility of injuring yourself once you're already injured a part of your body goes up after every injury. So I don't blame him for that. But yeah, so toughness and mobility for sure were really big deals to me, and that combined with his naturally strong arm and putting in the work and his work ethic while at EMCC, all are really good signs. And if I was a D1 guy, scout or college coach, that is, I would be pretty impressed. There would not be a doubt in my mind that I would offer this dude a full ride, honestly, as soon as possible, because he is that talented. And the maturity, the growth, it seemed evident at the time, I would say. But yeah, do you want to get into weaknesses real quick then?
Yeah, I was just about to flip it on to you and just say, as a D1 guy, what are the concerns that you have about giving Chad Kelly a full ride scholarship, whether that's from an on-field or off-field perspective?
So I'll talk on-field first. Well, I'll just talk on-field for now, because I really don't know if there was anything off the field that concerned me while he was at EMCC for those couple months. So yeah, on the field, he most definitely trusted his arm a little bit too much, and this is a pretty common weakness among talented quarterbacks in general. They'll trust their arm too much, and so they'll either stare down a receiver or try to fit a ball into somewhere where it shouldn't be, and this is kind of another thing to add on to his toughness, but sometimes, it's important to know when to quit on a play, just because you don't want to do too much and it causes a turnover or you lose a bunch of yards, right? But there are definitely times where he was doing a little bit too much. I'm not going to lie. It didn't show up on the highlight reels, obviously, but in games you could see that there were times where he was doing a little bit too much, trying to run around and, throw off balance or throw across his body, stuff like that. Stuff that, the real deal, I would say. So someone that I had absolutely no doubts about wouldn't do, when it comes to being a prospect. Because a prospect that if I was a D1 guy, a prospect that I would have no doubts about is somebody that is extremely disciplined from a mental aspect, and that means being able to read a play right, not just obviously, there are going to be plays that are scripted and, it has to work a certain way. But then there are plays where he has a little bit more free reign and he could read the defense better. And I honestly felt like there were times he got a little bit lazy and tried to force balls in. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Well, actually, honestly, most of the time it worked. But that's still something to keep an eye on, though, for sure. Just some of the undisciplined play there. Just trusting his arm a little bit more. Just trusting his arm a little bit too much, I would say. Or just trusting his overall ability a little bit too much, because there are also times he will not slide while he's running. And, I respect toughness, but there's no reason to take a hard hit if it doesn't mean anything, if it doesn't result in a touchdown, to be honest. So yeah. About you?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of tag on to a lot of the same things as far as you talked about how his toughness is a strength, but some strengths can also be weakness, right? Because it's like an ego thing. And I think that he would, while he didn't take that many sacks, he would still hold on to the ball for a really long time. And, most of the time it ended up being harmless, but we'll see this kind of transition when we talk in the next segment about Ole Miss, how this becomes like a problem. He's running around or he hangs in there too long, and while he can make those 30-yard throws while he's getting hit at the JUCO level, that doesn't work at the Division I level. I'd also say he didn't like to use his checkdowns that much at East Mississippi, and once again, I think that that's the level of competition that he was surrounded by, but that's certainly concerning when it's just like push downfield, because those checkdowns are very important and they show a smart quarterback. And you kind of hit on both of those. And the last thing that I was going to say is, plays where he did have reads, he would look at one read and he would either throw it or he would run, basically. So he didn't show a lot of capabilities of working high to low or low to high. Like I said, where he used his eyes very well, I like to say his eye usage was by design, versus he wasn't able to move safeties during plays if it wasn't called on him to do so. So just not being able to get past the first read kind of causes the rest of these problems. But certainly, holding on to the ball too long, not using your checkdowns are byproducts of only being able to throw to one read. Most of the time, he didn't show a lot of IQ as far as reading a defense.
And, honestly, here, I'm just going to include this here. Some of those I don't want to say mental issues. I guess some of those weaknesses isn't a huge deal when scouting a JUCO prospect, because a lot of D1 guys kind of just expect that, a lot of D1 coaches kind of just expect he's not going to be completely perfect. Because if he was completely perfect, he wouldn't be at a JUCO right now, to be honest. And if he is, then that's a steal. But those are pretty rare to come by, if I'm being honest. And so some of those mental issues that we talked about, I don't want to call them mental issues, IQ issues. How about that? Football IQ issues. Those are warranted to a degree on the JUCO level, because I mean, at least personally, I believe that when talented guys are given lesser competition to go up against, their discipline in general just kind of goes down, because they always want to go for the big play, for the flashy play, because it looks cool. And if they could do it, then they'll do it. And if it works most of the time, then what's the problem, right? So I'm just throwing that out there. But other than that, there's no doubt that this guy, Chad Kelly, was a Power 5 school for sure. I mean, obviously his high school reel spoke for itself. And then his JUCO film spoke for itself. He put up the numbers. He won a championship. He did really well. And not a lot of JUCO players could do that, honestly. The only other JUCO quarterback that I could think of that went to a JUCO for 1 year as a quarterback, won pretty much every single game in the national championship, was Cam Newton. So there's that, and that's pretty good company, to be honest. But yeah, so that's all I gotta say about JUCO Chad Kelly.
All right. Well, coming up next, we will discuss Ole Miss Chad Kelly. Obviously, the JUCO experiment worked. Welcome back to Playmakers Corner. Here on the podcast, we're talking Chad Kelly today, and we're transitioning into his Ole Miss days. Simon, if you want to talk about some of the strengths that he showed at Ole Miss when, he got his second chance at the collegiate level and what that looked like.
Yeah, so I'll be real. On the field, for the most part, when he was healthy, because he did get injured a little bit later, but we'll talk about that then. He honestly played pretty well. There were some, I would say there were most definitely some concerns coming out. A lot of the same concerns we talked about from the JUCO part of his film for sure. But he overall statistically, and then on the field, he just played really well. He was a very complete quarterback, and he was in the SEC. So obviously Chad Kelly committed to Ole Miss in the SEC, and that's a tough go for sure. There are a few Ole Miss quarterbacks that succeed at all. Eli Manning's the only other one that comes to mind right now, and that's a pretty long time ago. But that should say all you need to know. So when Chad Kelly came to Ole Miss, he threw for more than 4,000 yards, 31 touchdowns. The Rebels went 10-3, and they won their last game, the bowl game, the Sugar Bowl. I'm also pretty sure. Didn't they beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa as well? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they beat Bama one year. It's when they were ranked in the top 15. I think they were number 15 actually. So
well, then that has to be this year then. Okay. So yeah, and they beat Alabama, which I don't want to I don't want to bring up all of that, but from the top of my head, some of the guys on that squad most definitely included Minkah Fitzpatrick, Marlon Humphrey, and then, a whole ton of other linebackers and defensive linemen that were first-round guys. You know how Alabama is. Especially in Tuscaloosa, that's not an easy thing to do at all. And, the fact that Chad Kelly beat Alabama, which was, I want to say, only the third or fourth other time in history. Dang, that's crazy. But only the third or fourth other time in history that Ole Miss has beat Alabama ever. That's a pretty big deal. So, the strengths for me was that he was able to adjust, a lot of the same strengths like great arm power, mobility, toughness, all that applied to, I guess, to the college level of Chad Kelly for sure. Because it showed, I would say, it showed statistically, and it showed through wins as well when it came down to it, Let's not get it twisted. Ole Miss didn't exactly have a whole ton of talent. If I remember correctly, I think Chad Kelly's best receivers were Evan Ingram, which, okay, granted, I'll give him that. And then Laquan Treadwell, who is a notorious NFL draft bust as well. I'll give him this. He was pretty good in college, but I'm just going to be honest, because he was a bust in the NFL, it most definitely gives me the idea that Chad Kelly was the reason he did so well. And, outside of Laquan Treadwell, I guess you could throw in Laramie Tunsil. So that's one good offensive lineman he had. But
you already said Evan Ingram, right?
Yeah, and Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram was definitely, his biggest weapon for sure. And maybe DK Metcalf or AJ Brown were there, but they were freshmen, so I don't really count that, to be honest. But either way, he did the most, in my opinion, with the talent that was there at Ole Miss. And it's not like Ole Miss is one of the better recruiters in the SEC. So for me, that said all I needed to know about Chad Kelly strength-wise. He had a lot of the same strengths while at East Mississippi, obviously, but he adapted to the play of the SEC. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyways, what about you? Were there any other strengths of Ole Miss Chad Kelly?
So I put here that I think his ball placement actually improved from JUCO to Ole Miss, because there were some windows that he fitted in that, like you said, the SEC is more demanding, and there's some great defensive backs and linebackers that can play the pass. And he did a good job, especially on routes towards the outside of the field, like those harder throws, he did a great job at leading his receivers, or at least letting them have a chance to make a play on the ball. Because there is some times where his pass catchers bailed him out by catching something over a defender's head. But, there's still something to be said that they were able to make a play on the ball at all. Like, a lot of quarterbacks can't make those throws where it's at the other defender's helmet, and the receivers can make a play on it. And I think that he displayed like great chemistry with his wide receivers at Ole Miss, despite their talent level. And I think that's why they were able to succeed. And like you said, he elevated the play of others, at least through his talent. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he blew me away there. I put his athleticism. He looked even more athletic, even after his torn ACL, his second torn ACL. I was kind of blown away by just his burst, really, on especially read option plays and quarterback powers. I didn't expect 6'2", 215 Chad Kelly to be running quarterback powers so well and to score a lot of touchdowns on the ground, honestly. So his athleticism, and my last strength to kind of pair with that athleticism was his throw on the run was mind-boggling. He was able to throw perfect balls while moving to the right or moving to the left. Like, he didn't have to plant his feet, but he also showed discipline to be able to plant his feet on a dime, and throw a good ball. One particular play that stood out to me for that was he was rolling out right and the cornerback was playing a flat, and Evan Ingram took off up the field, and he hit Evan Ingram in stride while sprinting to the right to avoid the pressure for a touchdown. And he made it look so easy, but really there's a lot more that goes into throwing on the run, especially when you're running full speed. So I was definitely impressed.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, I most definitely agree. Like I said, I feel like he's had a really good skill set to work with, but he most definitely improved from his JUCO days for sure. Because like you said, he had much better ball placement. I feel like also he made some better decisions too. Like, he wasn't as, as sporadic. Like, he was much more disciplined. He played within himself. And honestly, when he played within himself, he would just take over games sometimes, And there are some players who could do that for sure. Like, you really can't teach, like, I guess that kind of mentality of like, all right, well, I'm about to put the team on my back. I'm just going to make whatever plays necessary to get this dub, And he did it. And he did it consistently, I felt. Even before he tore his ACL that second time. Or third time, I don't actually remember, but he was there at Ole Miss for 2 seasons. So in the second season, he tore his ACL after 8 or 9 games. But yeah, but anyways, about some of the weaknesses, Kodey, that you saw while he was at college.
So I'd have to say that not taking from like a pro team perspective, right? Because in the previous segment we talked from a Division I perspective. From a pro perspective, not taking snaps under center was pretty concerning to watch. We've seen what happens sometimes when quarterbacks don't take any snaps under center. Paxton Lynch. And, that's a bit concerning because it's different having to step back, and take huge steps to get back deep in the pocket from under center versus, and even handing the ball off, right? And having to turn around to do that versus snaps out of shotgun where all the handoffs are in front of you. You know what I'm saying? So that was concerning. And I think that we see a little bit of the effects of that later on. I'm also going to say that the torn ACL, like the second one, I know that I just talked about how his athleticism was good, but once again, from an injury perspective, 2 torn ACLs in 4 years is definitely a red flag as far as like durability goes, especially with how hard Chad Kelly plays. It's something that, if he's still in the NFL for the next few years and he plays more, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened again.
Yeah.
And lastly, his decisions, he made some very head-scratching decisions with the ball that most of the time, I won't say most of the time. sometimes he got really lucky, like in that Alabama game with that deflection that probably should have been a pick off his back foot across the field, turn around 180, like
screenplay.
Yeah,
it was a screenplay.
It was just silly stuff like that. And it actually cost them games down the stretch a lot of the time, especially his last year at Ole Miss against better teams, where he would really try and force the ball into that first or second read. He got better at making reads, but he would just force the ball really hard. And it ended up biting them in the butt, and that's why Ole Miss wasn't contending for an SEC championship despite beating a team like Bama, because he wouldn't be able to close out games as well, I guess is the proper way to say it. Like his weakness wasn't closing out at the collegiate level.
Right, yeah.
What are weaknesses you saw?
Well, first off, I for sure agree with you with all of those. To piggyback kind of on the durability thing, that was most definitely, if I'm an NFL scout, that's definitely something keep an eye on, and with 2 ACLs, like that's not for a quarterback who, doesn't have to run a ton, to be honest. That's not the biggest concern, but kind of like what I was saying with EMCC, Chad Kelly, honestly, there were times where he was very undisciplined and he wouldn't slide, where he would take unnecessary hits like almost all the time, and he did a little bit, just a little bit, a better job of protecting himself on the next level, but honestly not enough. And that's honestly probably why he ended up tearing his ACL, or was it a meniscus tear as well? I'm pretty sure it was
I just knew that it was an ACL, but it could have been also a meniscus tear.
Meniscus. Yeah, so it was a lateral meniscus tear along with the ACL tear, so that's even worse, to be honest. And I feel like if he did a better job of taking care of his body and preserving himself throughout a game, then that may not have been such a big issue, but durability for me as a NFL scout, that's definitely an issue, because you have the injuries and we already know that he's not, he doesn't protect himself. Like, he's pretty reckless out there. So those are already 2 big flags together that honestly make up that durability flag for me. So yeah. And then discipline, that's another thing. He got better. Like, obviously he had to have gotten better from his JUCO days to play the way he did, in the SEC, right? Like, I feel like there's no way that this dude just stayed the same talent wise. And then, put up, I guess, pretty successful stats. So he definitely progressed a little bit, but I would have liked to see a little bit more discipline in that progression as well. Like you said, he made some pretty head-scratching decisions. He was still trying to force some balls. There's plenty of plays, to be honest. There are plenty of touchdown plays that he had where he definitely stared down that receiver. And like you said, the next season it showed, because in those games that he played before he tore his meniscus and ACL, they went 4-5. So it wasn't like, maybe they would have made a bowl game, but it was, it would have been one of those bowl games that didn't matter. So there you go. And yeah, honestly, that's really all I gotta say. Do you want me to go into his off the field stuff? Because I definitely can as well.
Well, I was just going to mention that, as an NFL scout, that he's a project player, right? That's understood that he's going to need some work. He's going to have to be brushed up on his mental capacities, right? And that's something that you accept with college talent, especially ones that have as good of an arm as Chad Kelly did or does, however you want to say it. But the off the field issues is what dropped his draft stock, I'd say, more than anything else.
Yeah, it most definitely dropped his draft stock by at least 4 or 5 rounds, to be honest. Do you want me to go into that? Because I definitely can.
Do you want to just talk about his off the field things in college, and then we'll talk about what he did in the pros?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I could do that, because it's still pretty significant, to be honest. So I had to really like do the math on this. But like I said, he really only did 1 year at EMCC. To be honest, really only 1 semester at EMCC, and then he went to Ole Miss for the spring. But oh my god, I don't know how he did this, but he went back to Buffalo, where he's from, or around that area, I guess. And this was a week before he committed to Ole Miss. But this was in December. It had to have been either in December or November, because there was no way, knowing the coach at EMCC, that he would have let him play with, oh my God, with what happened. But basically, he went up to a club, or my bad, sorry, club as in a local restaurant, same thing, right? And, God, he got kicked out of the restaurant initially because, you know, he was probably acting rowdy and stuff. So there you go. And then he ended up coming back and punching the bouncer after refusing to leave the restaurant a second time. And then he threatened to, and this is his words that I'm reading from the report right now. This is Chad Kelly's words. He said, he threatened them, and he said he's going to go to my car and get my AK-47 and spray this place. And then the police were called to the scene. Chad Kelly fought the cops while being removed from a pickup truck. It doesn't say whether it's his pickup truck or not. So, you know, there's that. And he got arrested. And this is where we could talk about privilege, because he did not get charged with anything significant that I could see. And obviously he's still alive, because if a person of color were to physically attack and punch cops, it's game over. And we all know that. You should know that at least. But he did it. And then he committed to Ole Miss the next week. Then he went to Ole Miss and did all of that. So, Jesus, I don't know how he got away with that, but the privilege is strong with this one here, if I'm being honest, because nobody else is going to get away with that, even if they're white, to be honest. But he's also Jim Kelly's nephew, so keep that in mind as well. And then I think in his second season, or around his second season, oh my God, I don't even know why he did this, but he went back to his brother. So his little brother plays high school football. He went to his game, and there's like, I guess, a late hit or something on his little brother. And for some reason, Chad Kelly thought it'd be a good idea to storm the field and try to fight somebody. And he most definitely got in a fight with, at least a verbal argument with the refs, and then with some of the players. So imagine a young man, a 20-year-old, storming a high school football game, trying to fight a bunch of high schoolers or high school refs. And he got away with it. Well, okay, I wouldn't say he got away with it, but it definitely could have been worse. And I would say those were the biggest reasons why. Plus, you know, the Clemson reason that we already talked about, where he visibly cussed out his position coach or whoever on the sideline during that spring game. So all those things combined resulted in Chad Kelly getting picked last in the 7th round of the 2017 NFL draft. But he was still drafted, though, despite all of that, despite the injury concerns. And yeah, so there you go. What do you guys say about that, Kodey?
Yeah, I was having a real hard time trying not to laugh at the little brother one. That one is probably like my favorite one, as far as like just comedically, like, is this real? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's no way. Yeah. Like, when I read about that, I was like, no, because you told me about it. Sometime I think around the time when it happened, and I was like, no way. And I looked it up. I was like, oh, no way. Like, what the heck is he doing? This is a college kid. This is an aspiring professional football player doing this clown stuff, right? And I think that when he, and also just like that Buffalo incident, I feel like in Buffalo, he thinks that he's untouchable because he's Jim Kelly's nephew. Like, that name in Buffalo is probably like, I'd say the best name you could have, honestly. Because they just like that Buffalo doesn't have like a strong other sports team, because the Sabres are bad, but
yeah, you know, for sure.
And I think that, you know, there's definitely there's that name privilege that he had in Buffalo, and, you know, just like there's speaking about white privilege, there's people of color who defend themselves where they're in danger and they feel like they need to fight for their lives against the police and they die, right? But then Chad Kelly is straight up throwing haymakers and he's still around to tell the tale. So there's definitely
threatening to, commit a mass shooting as well. But
we Ben knew that white terrorists, right? That's what it is. It's domestic terrorism, especially, or threats of domestic terrorism from Chad Kelly in this instance goes, you don't pay for your life with that. And we've seen that plenty of times in the past few years. So yeah, it's frustrating and ridiculous. And spoiler alert, it still gets worse at the NFL level. And we'll talk about that here in a second. Simon, do you have anything left on this segment?
Yeah, real quick. When Chad Kelly rushed that field, he was a senior in college. Actually, no, he was older than a senior. So imagine a 21 or 22-year-old doing that. To be honest, that should probably, I guess, cap out where his maturity levels are, or be an indicator of where his maturity levels should be capped at. But yeah, that's really all I gotta say.
Well, all right. On the next segment, what's going on with Chad in the NFL? Back here on Playmakers Corner, we're still talking Chad Kelly, and we're going to investigate what his NFL career has looked like, and I'll give you a hint. It's not great because you probably haven't seen him start a single regular season game. Just kidding. You definitely haven't. So as far as things that we've seen, this is all in preseason games, so the film's a little bit different, but also I think it's a fair way to assess his individual talent a bit more because he's not playing with first string guys. Does that sound fair, Simon?
Yeah, no, for sure.
So, there's a little bit of differences here that I've seen. His ability to extend plays impressed me in the fact that when he's running around, he's still able to keep his eyes downfield a lot more than I'd even see at Ole Miss. And this was specifically Colts film that I'm referring to. The Broncos film is a lot of the same things, but his ability to extend plays is really strong and, keep his eyes downfield. That's huge, especially in the modern NFL where we're at today, where the pass rushers are just getting faster and stronger. To be able to elude them and then still make a completion is very reassuring to see out of a young quarterback. So, and I'd also say that he, on the field wise, grew just a little bit over the past couple of years because he was able to finally throw checkdowns and make a few multiple reads. He wasn't doing it consistently, but when he did do it, I think it was successful, and he also put his running backs in a good position to succeed with the throws and checkdowns that he was making. He wasn't laying them out to die or anything like that. He wasn't throwing them into traffic or into a tackle. He gave them plenty of space to work with. So
yeah,
I'd say those are, I get my strengths short because there isn't really a whole lot of film on him because his career at this point in the NFL doesn't really matter. Simon, what were some strengths that you saw from, seriously, his community college film was 40 minutes long of highlights, just highlights. Yeah. Then his Ole Miss video that we watched was like 20 minutes, I think.
And it could have been longer.
Yeah, and it definitely could have been longer. The NFL film that we watched, it took 4 videos to get up to like 15 minutes. So if that doesn't tell you the significance of Swag Kelly's career this far and how swag-less it is, then I don't know what does.
Oh, for sure. My strengths, really, I'll keep them short as well. I would have to say the mobility, and I'm saying this because he was coming off his third, either one. It was more than one ACL injury / meniscus injury. That's really hard to come from, and here's why. Because generally when players, tear their ACL or tear their meniscus, especially if they do it multiple times in a pretty small span of time, it definitely permanently affects their ability to, I guess their top ability to, have really good top end speed and agility and all that stuff. Everything speed related, movement related, So there should have definitely been some things taken off. He should have been losing, I guess, some of that ability, right? Like he shouldn't have been as mobile and as agile and, to be honest, as explosive as he was in the preseason, to be honest. It's kind of incredible. He's kind of just one of those guys that just naturally, they're really good athletes and they're freaks of nature and they kind of regenerate freakishly to a degree. Adrian Peterson was like that, for example, after his ACL injury. And, for Chad Kelly to go through all those injuries and still look really good mobility-wise, that says a lot for me. And just to put this out there, I'm pretty sure, so the year he was drafted, that next preseason and, season in general, he didn't play at all because they wanted him to recover. So there's that. So really, we only have one preseason to work with, in a couple games in there. So like you said, there's not really a lot of film to go off of. But yeah, the mobility was really good. And I'm just going to throw in some intangibles for sure. But he definitely took over some games. I'll buy preseason games, but there were drives where he just turned it on. And you could tell that he was just in the zone, and no matter what, his timing would be perfect, or he would fit in really good balls and make really good decisions and whatnot. And there were times he was just hot, and he was that dude. And to be honest, if he did not get in trouble, he most definitely could have started for the Broncos. But he didn't. So yeah, or any team, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to go into these weaknesses? I could start.
If you want to start, then yeah, sure. There's plenty to choose from because they're not really, or at least mine aren't really on the field. I have like one, but yeah, you can go ahead and start if you want.
Okay. I'll leave that on the field weakness to you then. I think we might have the same one, but if not, I'll just bring it back up. But yeah, off the field, he keeps getting in trouble. Like that whole year, pretty much, where he was like, where he was redshirted in the NFL, basically, because he was recovering from his injury. He really didn't get in trouble. He kept his head low, didn't do anything stupid, went to rehab. That's it. Very similar to his EMCC days for sure. But he did eventually get in trouble because it's Chad Kelly. And Kodey, you might a little bit more about the details with this, but basically he was arrested because he trespassed into some random guy's home after a party, and he was pretty drunk as well. And like he wouldn't leave, Am I missing anything there?
He literally walked in through like the front door, and this was late at night, and he sat down on the couch next to a mother and her child. Really drunk, and was asked to leave several times and did not until the cops were involved.
Yeah, that's true. And to be honest, okay, look, I don't want to slander his name and go into conspiracy theories, but the fans out there, look up Flemlo Raps and then look up Chad Kelly, because he had a really good theory about how maybe this wasn't the first time he came to this house, but because he was drunk, he didn't know better. But still, it doesn't justify his actions. But anyways, there's a lot there that just goes into how good of a person Chad Kelly is. And, that was pretty much the reason why he got cut by the Broncos, right, Kodey?
Yeah, he was immediately cut after that. And it honestly came at a time where he was in the conversation to become a starter for Denver just because of the quarterback limbo that we were in. And, like you said, as far as like that year that he was redshirted, he wasn't in the conversation, right? But then it was like, well, maybe we start Chad Kelly, and we're like, oh, is it Swag Kelly time? Just because of the depth that we didn't have on the depth chart. And then we start talking about it a little bit, and what happens, right?
Yeah, sure. That's the last incident actually I could find of Chad Kelly that's public for now. But just also keep in mind that we've been in a pandemic as well, so he probably hasn't had the opportunity to do anything stupid yet. And that sucks that I'm just gonna throw this out there. Like, it kind of sucks that I'm assuming that he's gonna do something dumb, but if you look at his track record, like, this dude's a grown man, still making the same mistakes that he did in college, And to be honest, like, there are plenty of high schoolers that would not make any of these mistakes at all in their career. But yet Chad Kelly keeps doing it, because also Chad Kelly keeps getting away with it and keep getting opportunities, because he did get picked up by the Colts that's where he is right now. So yeah, and then he a lot of the same things with the Colts, like, he did pretty well and whatnot, but I mean, not well enough, obviously, because they didn't go with him and they picked up Phillip Rivers, and there are some things to say about that as well. But anyways, Kodey, did you have any more weaknesses you want to talk about before I go on?
Well, I was just going to say, in preseason work, as far as on the field goes, he didn't ever handle the blitz. And he would get flustered, especially, I mean, you'd only have to bring 5 or 6 guys, and his head was spinning. That may just be from not playing a whole bunch, but yeah, that was, if I was game planning against Chad Kelly, I'm like, okay, what if I just sent an extra guy, and that would solve my problem, so.
Yeah, pretty much. His composure went down by I don't want to say by a lot, but there's definitely some regression there. For sure.
He's less confident in his ability to play, is what I think.
Yeah, and that's that is definitely another weakness as well, though,
Yeah. And I was going to say, as far as like just overall weaknesses go, you talked about maturity, and I'm going to flip it. These kind of go hand in hand, right? But accountability, right?
Yes.
I don't feel like he's ever held himself accountable. And I don't think that coaches have really ever held him accountable for his actions. And, I don't think he was punished. And this could go back to him as a kid, right? Like, he's like, yeah, I'm Jim Kelly's nephew. And I bet he thought he was the hottest thing on the planet in Buffalo, right? And he just kind of did whatever he wanted and got away with it. Like, bro, even if I become famous, my kid gonna be humble and, like, mind his business, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
he's not
for sure.
Be a clown like Chad Kelly is, and that's why he's not a starter in the NFL by now, because he doesn't know. He's never had to be held accountable in his life, so he doesn't know how to hold himself accountable for his actions. I'd say maybe off and on the field, arguably. So, yeah, his accountability. If he became more accountable, then I think he would grow maturity-wise, but I just don't see that really happening.
Yeah, for sure. And, to be honest, it's really not a huge accomplishment to be one of the biggest deals in Buffalo or Mississippi, for that matter. So he really is content with being the way he is. And you made actually a really good point. Nobody's really held him accountable like that. They kind of just let him do whatever he wants. Because I guarantee you, if this dude was, and I'm saying this as a person of color, but if this dude was any other color or any other person but white, he would not be in the NFL. To be honest, he probably wouldn't even have a college career. As at least a career as successful as he had, to be honest. And
yeah, I think, is it the Undefeated that has a pretty good article on this?
Yeah, that's what I was reading from.
Yeah. So if you guys haven't checked it out, you guys could just look up like Undefeated Chad Kelly White Privilege, and they have a really good article. White
Privilege of Chad Kelly.
Yep, there it is. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a really good article, and it's absolutely correct. And, I'd say that the only person who ever held him accountable was Dabo Swinney by kicking him off the Clemson team. And you'd think that Chad, based off of what we talked about from his JUCO days, that he learned from that and grew, but it ended up just being more of the same after he got out of the JUCO system.
Yeah, for sure. Even Dabo Swinney though, like I'm not gonna let this dude get off the hook so quickly. But even Dabo Swinney said that he felt like Chad Kelly was a good person at heart. Look, man, I'm just gonna be honest. I don't know about that. Like, I don't want to say that he's just an inherently terrible person. Not that that has anything to do with play, because I'm just gonna be honest. There are plenty of athletes who are terrible people, but there are fantastic athletes. And then when it comes to sport, they get their stuff together. That's a censored version. But Chad Kelly, on the other hand, he keeps getting these chances, and even Dabo Swinney, like, yeah, he did cut him, but he also still, kind of gave him an endorsement as well, which ended up, in Chad Kelly parlaying that into an opportunity at the best JUCO in America. So EMCC being the best JUCO in America, they have a lot of privileges that a lot of other JUCOs just don't have. So, for example, they could offer scholarships. I don't know if they could offer full rides or not, but as close to full rides to a community college as you could get. So it's not like that's a whole ton, but basically he went there for free. They could offer the best facilities, or arguably the best facilities out of a lot of JUCOs in America, at least top 10 facilities, I would say, for sure, no doubt. They have dorms, because some JUCOs don't have dorms at all for their athletes. They have meal plans, like multiple meals a day meal plans. And if I'm just being honest, EMCC, in my opinion, is definitely comparable to an FCS D1 school. It's honestly better than than most D2 schools. So with all that, considered, Chad Kelly, even though he did go to a JUCO, he still went to the best one in America, which shows, his privilege, to be honest. Yeah.
So, Simon, I kind of talked about it a little bit, where I believe that once he becomes accountable, he will grow in maturity and potentially have a shot in the NFL. What do you think is something that Chad Kelly has to do, whether that's the same thing or in addition to becoming, or even having a shot at playing quarterback in a real NFL game?
Okay. I'm gonna answer your question, and I'm gonna come off with a pretty strong opinion, but I think it needs to be said. Because, this podcast is for, younger athletes out there that want to learn from Chad Kelly. So, yeah, but I'm gonna answer your question first. I think the biggest thing for him is that he needs to grow up. Like, dude, you're 25, but you still act like you're 14. That's a big 10-year mental gap, and that's unacceptable. You need to grow up. Grow up. Stop acting like an idiot. Stop going out and literally anytime you go out having an incident, in air quotation marks, and hold yourself accountable. And I know it's hard to hold himself accountable when nobody else is, but honestly, I do kind of believe that Chad Kelly needs to grow up, surround himself with people who are going to tell him straight up, like, hey, you need to grow up. Like, you need to stop acting like a baby, and you need to actually act like an adult. You're in the NFL, you have a job, you have a great opportunity, but you're wasting it. And even though nobody's going to take away that opportunity just yet, just know that your clock is on, that your career, it's that clock is pretty close to being spent up, to be honest. So he needs to grow up for sure. That's the biggest thing, and in all aspects, I would say off the field first, because that's just him holding himself accountable. And then on the field as well, he needs to get more disciplined. He needs to really dive into the playbook. He needs to study. He's with the Colts right now, so he needs to. I would love to see him go to Phillip Rivers and learn from Phillip Rivers, learn from a legend, learn from Jacoby Brissett as well, because he could definitely learn a lot of maturity skills from Jacoby Brissett, to be honest. And yeah, he needs to have I don't know, he just has to be a learner, be a student of the game, That comes with a lot of maturity. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for sure. And here's my strong opinion, because personally, I don't think he could do it. And if he does, cool. I'm happy for him. I want this guy to succeed. I really do want him to succeed. I want him to get better. I want him to be one of those stories where it's like, yeah, I was an idiot and I was given a million chances, but I ultimately made something out of it. Personally, I would still be a little peeved off because of the privilege and all that for sure, but it would be cool to see him grow up and to actually be successful in life, And that's something I genuinely want to see. Do I think he can? Do I think there are people around him that can help him get there? No, not at all. And to be honest, I think it would take him a really long time to find him a circle of friends or a circle of mentors. That's a really good that's a really good word. But yeah, a circle of mentors, a good support group that could realistically check him and check him hard every time he even comes close to making a bad decision like what he has been and continues to do. So yeah. Is that a little bit too tough? Like, do you think I'm on the mark, off the mark with that?
I don't think that there's such a thing as too tough for Chad Kelly after all that he's done.
Okay.
Because, I mean, look, every other resource has probably been exhausted, and the people who have probably tried to help him are also exhausted. And, he really does need to take it upon himself in order to grow. And if he doesn't, then, which he hasn't, right? Like, we look at things that are consistent from all the way back in the day, from Clemson to now, and you see the same things and the same patterns and the same, attempts to solve them all not working, then, yeah, it's really on him. And I don't think that it's too tough. And he needs some tough love, if that's, what it takes. That somebody has to snap him back into existence, I think, because he's just not serviceable at, I wouldn't say really anything, honestly, just because of how dysfunctional he is and how selfish he is. So
yeah,
and
I agree.
Yeah, that's teenager stuff. The world is bigger than you, Chad Kelly. That's what I have to say. Hopefully he doesn't.
No doubt. What were you gonna say?
I decided not to.
Okay.
Hopefully he doesn't walk into my house after this show.
Yeah. Oh, be careful.
Thank goodness he's in Indy now.
Yeah, no, for sure. But there are definitely lessons to learn from Chad Kelly. I already said a couple more. Kodey, what do you think are some lessons that some of these younger athletes out there could learn from Chad Kelly?
You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have discipline, you're not going anywhere. Oh. We've seen this story play out many different times over many different athletes' careers, and the sudden end of them, or the almost end of them. If you don't control yourself and you don't know, I'd say just self-control and discipline specifically, you could throw the football from one end of the field to the other, and people will try to make it work. They'll try to make it work, but until you are also going to reciprocate that and try and make it work, you won't go anywhere. I'd say that's the Stauffer advice from the Kelly implosion on the first episode of Playmakers Corner.
Yeah, hey, I love it, and Chad Kelly's implosion is still in progress, so we'll see until it starts changing, but we'll see. No, I totally agree. Discipline is key. There are plenty of coaches out there that would rather take a player that is extremely disciplined and smart as well over, a player that may be as naturally talented like a Chad Kelly. You know what I mean? because the thing is, talent, like, well, physical talent, that is, it definitely fades away as you get older. You know, you don't throw the same, don't run the same, or if you do, it hurts. But if you're disciplined and if you're smart, you could most definitely prolong your career as long as you need it to be. You know, and that doesn't mean that you have to go pro or that it guarantees you going pro, but being a disciplined player and being a good player, a hardworking one for sure, would most definitely at least get you an opportunity to go to college potentially for free or to go somewhere free. And, you know, there's a bunch of opportunities with that as well. So, yeah, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm just going to be honest with you, man. Most players, if they did what Chad Kelly did in that Clemson spring game, they would not have another opportunity to even go back to college. Maybe even, okay, they will probably have an opportunity to go to a JUCO, but even to go back to a D1 or D2 or even an FCS school, you know, like, I feel like a lot of players wouldn't even get that chance to go back.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, you know, because it was pretty bad. Like, it wasn't like it was a small, like, argument. Like, I'm pretty sure Chad Kelly threw something at the dude, so low-key probably could have pressed assault charges, but he didn't. So, there you go.
That's the Chad Kelly story. Could have pressed charges, but didn't.
Everyone could have pressed charges, but didn't. But yeah, exactly. So, you know, just for the young athletes out there, this is an excellent example of somebody who had all the talent of the world. And, you know, this is a really small exception, but had all the talent in the world, but he just didn't work out, you know? And if it wasn't for his privilege, you know, he would probably be bagging groceries somewhere or I don't know, doing something for minimum wage. So, because he is a Kelly, because, let's just be real, because he's white, you know, he got away with it and continues to get away with it and continues to get second, third, fourth, and 100th chances. Just know that, you know, if you're an athlete and you do some of, even any of these same things that Chad Kelly did, your career is, to be honest, most likely over or close to over. Yeah, that is my advice in this first episode of Playmakers Corner. Be disciplined. Don't be an idiot. Simple as that. You know? In the great words of Michael Scott to Dwight Schrute, just don't be an idiot. There you go.
Oh, man. Is that
that's facts, though?
Is that all we got for this episode?
Yeah, I feel like that's a good way of wrapping it up here.
Thank you so much for joining us in the first episode of the Playmakers Corner podcast. Be on the lookout for more episodes as we continue into this journey of JUCO and what it looks like. We will have some Last Chance U reviews going up for you. Go ahead and find us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I am Kodey Stoffer.
And I am Simon Villanos.
Catch you next time.
Peace.